Welcome to this session on operationalizing VMware Cloud on AWS with vRealize. I'm Brandon Gordon, and in this session, I'll be representing the vSphere admin. Also joining me today is Martijn Smit, playing the role of the network admin, and Vincent Riccio, playing the cloud admin. To start off, I'd like to give you a little background on who MOAD.io is. MOAD is Massachusetts Omni Automated Devices. So this is a high-end robotics firm that was founded back in the 80s. MOAD builds robots and associated software used for industrial purposes, self-driving equipment for farming. In 2019, MOAD was basically relaunched and rebranded as MOAD.io. We added online commercial sales, which covers programmable robots for home usage, as well as robotic kits, as well as IoT use cases. So as part of this transition, we've encountered some business and technical challenges. The first one is our sales are soaring, which is a great thing. We're seeing an unexpected spike in our CapEx demand. We also have a lot of outdated and old hardware in one of our data centers, and the lease for that data center is actually coming up for expiration. And we want to be able to continue to grow and leverage our existing management tools without doing too much retraining of our staff. So we've come up with a plan to leverage VMware Cloud on AWS. This will help us address our business demands, gives us the option of evacuating our data centers, helps us start using hybrid cloud. So as part of this, we will continue to use our existing vRealize Cloud Management. So to introduce you to our team, first we have the network admin, which Martijn will be representing. Martijn's goal is to make sure the network is rock solid, applications are happy, the network is performing well. Next is the vSphere admin. That's myself. My goal is to make sure the hybrid cloud is healthy, meets our demands for applications, availability and performance needs, and we have capacity. And then lastly, we have the cloud admin, which will be Vincent, and he will help show how we can create a self-service cloud, allow our internal users and developers consume our hybrid cloud. So we've divided up our migration to VMware Cloud on AWS into 3 phases. So the first phase is migration and planning, followed by managing applications, and then the last phase is self-service hybrid cloud. So the first phase, migration and planning, we'll assess our capacity needs, discover applications, finalize our migration scope, actually do the migration for some of these applications. Okay, here I am on the quick start page of vRealize Operations Cloud, and I'll start off by going to dashboards. And this first dashboard here is for the cloud management assessment, showing our VMC environment overview. The purpose of this dashboard is to give an overview of the environment to help us plan for when we do our migration. So this particular data center here, SC2DC01, is the data center we'll be targeting for the migration. So let me scroll down so we can see some data here. I can see how many virtual machines are in the environment that are running, how many are total, how many hosts we have. I can see my overcommit ratios. And then I can see my utilization, so our CPU and memory demand, our disk space demand, as well as our read and write IOPS and network transmit and receive rates. So all this data is useful for understanding the overall workload for this entire data center and what it may look like when we migrate it to VMware Cloud on AWS. This next section here shows this is our average virtual machine specs. So this is the average utilization of the virtual machines, average configuration of the virtual machines. And then we also here have the total resources provisioned to the virtual machines. So this includes powered on and powered off virtual machines. So the number of CPU, memory, and disk space. And over here, we have a distribution chart showing the distribution of guest OSs for the environment. The next section down here is host hardware details. This helps us identify hosts that might be large or have very fast CPUs. These are ones that may need special attention. The last section down here is the virtual machine capacity details, all the details you would need to do the planning. And you can click on the export here and actually export this as a CSV. So the next phase is actually going into the scoping. So this dashboard helps you start narrowing things down and identifying potential virtual machines that may require special attention. So you see here we've identified the virtual machines with the highest read and write IOPS, with the highest network transmit and receive rates, just to help identify these outliers to see if they need any special attention or if those are okay to move. We have idle virtual machines listed here. So these are virtual machines you may not want to move because they've been detected as being idle. Then we have the next section here is a distribution of the CPU and memory configuration. And we've we have a list over here identifying virtual machines with large amounts of CPU and memory to help you, identify those potential outliers. The next two sections here is disk space configured, or guest file system used. So this top one is looking at basically the size of the virtual disks, and then the guest file system used is looking at what's being used inside the guest OS. So you can leverage these either way, whether you want to plan for, basically the VMs being thick or thin, helps you get a visibility from both perspectives. And again, we have flags over here for outliers, so VMs that are large that may need additional analysis. And the last section down here is the virtual machine capacity details again. And with that, let me hand it over to Martijn.
All right, so I'm going to be taking the networking admin persona of this MOAD company. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to help my VI admin colleagues to migrate this application towards VMware Cloud and AWS by making sure that we've got the right application boundaries, looking at network traffic requirements and health, just making sure that we cover all of our networking bases before we actually migrate. So if I log into vRealize Network Insight here, and I'm welcomed by a lot of things, but I'm specifically interested into the application section here. And what you're looking at right now is a list of all the applications that vRealize Network Insight already has. You can see we've taken a tiered approach, so we can see the amount of tiers like web app database and then the number of members. And to get these application constructs into vRealize Network Insight, you can either add them manually by specifying the VMs and the IP addresses, etc. But we can also use something called Discover. So application discovery can discover these application boundaries, these constructs on metadata such as tags or a naming convention, or you can pull that down from ServiceNow. But I'm going to be using the flow-based application discovery. And this one is special because you don't have to have anything in place. The only thing that this application discovery method uses is the actual network traffic that flows through the network. So on the back end, there's a machine learning algorithm that looks at the network traffic patterns going over the actual network and then forming these application boundaries based on the VM names as well. So we've got a 3-tier app right here that it's discovered just by looking at the network traffic. And we can see we've got an application tier, a web tier, and database tier, and then it discovered that these applications are a part of that application tier. So we're focusing on the MOAD application right now, and I've already discovered this into the systems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going back to applications and then search for MOAD. And we're looking at the production shopping cart app right here. So if I open this up, I get a application dashboard. We can see a couple of things that are interesting right off the bat. So incoming traffic, outgoing traffic, what's the change in the last 24 hours? So if there's a big spike, I can see the amount of flows and also the flows that might have problems, whether it be latency problems or whether they're not protected by any firewall rules. I can also see the internet countries that are actually looking at this application over the internet. And then the makeup of this application. So are they consistent of VMs, physical IP addresses, or Kubernetes services? So if I go down a little bit, I have the application topology here, which shows me how the network is behaving within this application. So I can see different tiers, the members in those tiers, so like which VMs are in there. But I can also see who is talking to who and if there are any problems with any of these workloads. One thing that I want to show you before I move on to a pinboard where I've pretty much pinned everything that would be related to this migration is the amount of network traffic going through each and every single VM. So the top talkers of this application, you can see we've got these 3 VMs in this app, and the front end is the one that's talking way the most, so about 2 times as much. 1 terabyte for the last 24 hours is still not that much. So this is a perfect application for us to migrate. So I want to look at more information around this application, around the network requirements, performance, all of that. I'm going to switch to a pinboard where I have put together all of these this information coming from this application from VRNI, but putting it together in one place. So for instance, I'm looking at the total traffic of this application and then the difference between north, south and east, west. For data center interconnect purposes, I want to have a good idea of what the maximum rate of network traffic is, what the average rate of traffic is. And then we've got the top talkers here again. So in this case, I just need to make sure that we've got at least 50 megs of traffic capacity between the on-prem and the VMC environment. But again, that's not too bad. So what I also can do is I can look at the application dependencies here. So if I group the security planner based on applications, I can see the network traffic patterns going towards other applications between this MOAD application. So in this case, the MOAD application is only talking to another application. So it's only outgoing traffic from the MOAD towards the CRM records. And all of the other communication is towards the internet, some shared services for physical and virtual services like Active Directory, DNS, and those things. So again, this is a perfect application to migrate because it's a relatively standalone one. If I scroll down, I can see the VM metrics. So I can see the network traffic pattern behavior for per VM level. And I can also see which countries are accessing this application the most. So in this case, I've got the United Kingdom way at the top. So in this case, it might make more sense to put this application into the London VMware Cloud and AWS location. If I scroll down a little bit, but I've pretty much gotten enough information from this dashboard in order to make sure that I understand what the network requirements are. I also understand what the impact is going to be for the east-west traffic. So now I'm going to take this application construct and I'm actually going to put it into VMware ACX in order to facilitate the migration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into ACX, and this goes beyond my networking engineering capabilities, or responsibilities, but let's just move forward, because I want to make sure that ACX and the data center interconnect, the ACX interconnect, actually is functioning before we give the go ahead for this migration. I can see we have this San Jose data center and the VMware Cloud and AWS in US West 2 in Oregon. All the services are green. Just want to check the topology real quick, just to make sure that everything is still green here, which it is, so that's good. All right, so now I'm switching roles a little bit into the migration admin. Typically the network admin would not do this, but just to show you how the transition between the application discovery within vRealize towards ACX works, is that we've got this migration tab, these are mobility groups, and we can use this to migrate. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna fire off a script, a fling as we call that. It's a simple PowerShell script that connects to vRealize Network Insight, but also ACX, using a couple of parameters like the vRealize service. This could be an on-prem vRealize platform or the vRealize Cloud instance. And I just want to sync this MOAD shopping cart. So if I omit this parameter, it's going to do all the applications, but in this case, I'm just going to look for one application that I want to migrate. Let me enter my password for vRealize. And then it's connecting to vRealize Network Insight and then giving me all of the applications that I want. And then connecting towards VMware ACX in order to deliver those application constructs. And now it's created a mobility group for that MOAD shopping cart. So if I go back to ACX, you can see the new mobility group here. I can edit it in order to give the right parameters. So in this case, I just want to select the front-end web server just to save a little bit of time, but you can select any and all VMs that you would like. I'd select the destination, resource pool, or cluster. The migration is queued. And now it'll start to sync. So what I want to do is I want to keep an eye out on this migration just to make sure that everything is golden. Let me log into the on-prem vCenter, where the source VM is located. We saw earlier that it's this front-end VM, and what I want to do is I just want to start a ping based on this IP address, so we can keep an eye out on the actual migration. Right, so that's going back to ACX. We can see it's been synced, and of course this is sped up a little bit, and now it's switching over as well. And when it's switching over, it's actually stopping the VM itself and then starting it on the destination site. So the VM will now be started in the VMware Cloud and AWS environment. And for this, I just want to see another ping again. So again, this has been sped up a little bit, but you can see there's just maybe 30 seconds of pings that are being wasted. And now if I go back to the source vCenter, I can see that it's switched off ACX made sure that the VMware is powered off, and then it powers it, replicates it towards the destination, and then starts to back up again. All right, all complete. So this gives you an idea of how to use the vRealize Network Insight application discovery, and then making sure that it goes seamlessly into ACX. After you know the networking requirements and all of the impact that it's going to have, and then making sure that you can migrate with ease by using that fling to integrate both vRNI and ACX together. So typically as a network admin, I'm not going to be bothered with these migrations, but I do want to keep an eye on these migrations. So what I've done also is I've put together a pin board for day 2 ops. While my colleagues are doing the migration over the data center interconnect using the ACX layer 2 extensions in order to make sure that we don't have to re-IP our VMs and just making a couple pings go away. I just want to make sure that the network connectivity between the VMC environment and the on-prem data center is right, is correct. So we can have a look at the latency that goes between different data centers and VMC. If I scroll down, I can also have a look at the individual flows that go through these layer 2 extensions. I can also have a look at the details for these, so looking at like the source destination VM, what type of ports are being used, all of that, and then also the actual graphs attached to those. If I go a level higher, I can group all the network traffic per network. So in this case, I'm grouping per VLAN, per logical switch, and then everything is extended over ACX towards VMC and AWS. I can see that traffic going over here. And again, I can open up these other networks and then showing the traffic for that specific network. So this is a little bit less used than the other one, as you can see. And then if I scroll down, I can also have a look at the utilization of the ACX appliances, because we also want to keep an eye on that. So as you can see, it's not that much that traffic that's going over these appliances, but you do want to keep an eye on them before it crosses its threshold and you're having a bad day. And just because I'm not doing this migration, I still want to be apprised of what the progress is. So vRNI also gives you the opportunity to look at the applications that are still on-prem, the applications that are already migrated, and then same thing for all the VMs. So just want to keep an eye out. And I'll show you the network throughput of the ACX L2 extension appliances earlier. But you don't want to go in every single day or every single hour and make sure that everything is okay. So what you can do within vRNI is you can set these thresholds, these analytics thresholds, where you can set a threshold for a specific scope of traffic. So whether that be VMs or flows based on a destination or the layer 2 extensions. You can set a threshold based on a number. In this case, I've chosen 50 megabits per second. And you can see anything within this red area would be flagged as a violation. And in this case, we've not had any violations, which is good. I mean, this traffic is just below the 50 megs, so it's not raising any violations. If there is a violation, I could get an alert based on email or an SB trap, and then make sure that traffic does not go over the configured maximum of the L2 extension, for example, and then reroute traffic if needed, or make sure that some migrations are giving priority because the network traffic needs to shift from on-prem towards VMC. So this is me keeping an eye out on the migration itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Martijn. Now we've completed the migration and planning phase, and now we're moving on to the managing applications phase. I'm again in vRealize Operations Cloud, and now what I'm showing is the list of applications that have been discovered by vRealize Network Insight. So we see here I've got this MOAD shopping cart application that's been discovered. So this is one that's already been discovered in vRNI. And you can see here it's the application, here are the tiers that are defined, and then here's the virtual machines in each of those tiers. Going to the alerts tab here, we can see alerts for the virtual machines, as well as some of the infrastructure related alerts. If we had alerts from vRNI, they would show here as well. Even alerts from Log Insight would show in this page. So from here, want to talk a little bit more about the actual migration. So when we're doing this migration, we've identified an application that we want to migrate. So we'll go to this new CMA VMC application groupings dashboard. And we'll see I have already selected my application. So this is the discovered application from VRNI. And the interesting part is down here in the performance section. So now we can see a distribution of the performance. So basically the performance of the virtual machines related to this application. And we also see from a memory perspective. And then we can select individual virtual machines that make up the application and then look at the KPIs for these virtual machines. So we can look at things like CPU ready, co-stop. So this helps us get an understanding of how the application is performing before we do a migration. But after we do the migration, we'll come to this VMC performance validation dashboard. And with this dashboard, we can go in and specify our time range to compare before and after a migration. So I'll go in here and set my time range. So this is my time before we did the migration. And then on the other side here, I'll set my time range for after the migration was complete. So now I can go in and find my virtual machines. So here's my virtual machine before and after. And I'll scroll over and I can compare my performance metrics. So here, an example of disk latency. You can see it was 8.53 milliseconds before, and after the migration, it's 7.4 milliseconds. And scrolling down, you can actually go in and pick individual metrics. So this example here, I'm showing CPU ready time before and after. I'll show you a little bit about what we can do to actually manage a VMC environment. So the first one here is the inventory dashboard. So this dashboard helps you basically understand what you have in VMC. The next one here is utilization and performance. So this one is a bit more interesting. This one, you select your SCDC, and then you can go in and look at the virtual machines and identify the ones that are basically the worst performing ones. So you can see here I've got my worst performing VMs from CPU ready perspective, from co-stop, IO wait, memory contention, swap in, and balloon. So it helps you, identify problems on the compute side. This VMC capacity dashboard shows you the capacity of your SDDCs. So we can see my SDDC here has more than a year worth of capacity remaining, has 73% capacity remaining, and it can fit 79 more virtual machines. So from a capacity perspective, it sounds like things are doing pretty good. Still got a year before I need to worry about anything, and I can still fit 79 more VMs. Scrolling down, we can see more details here. So the capacity for the clusters, the hosts, data stores, disk groups, as well as a list of all of our virtual machines from a capacity perspective as well. The next dashboard here is showing our cost overview. This connects into the Cloud Services portal, downloads your bill, and allows you to see your expenses. So the next dashboard is the VMC Management VM Monitoring dashboard. So in this dashboard, you can actually go in and look at the management infrastructure for the VMC environment. So the next piece I want to show here is some of our additional analytics that are available in vRealize operations. So these are not VMC specific features, but these are additional features that work for VMC as well. So this one here is showing more details on our capacity projections. So like I mentioned previously, we had more than a year worth of capacity remaining. So you can see our historical utilization here and then the projection into the future. So this is showing where it projects our capacity to be. So you see we still have plenty of capacity, but if our growth rate increases, then we'll see that time remaining will start getting lower and lower. But the idea is this will give us a proactive warning, so we know when we should start thinking about adding additional capacity. We also can look at it from a memory perspective, so we can see what our projections are for memory usage, as well as disk space. So in a VMC environment, it's really critical to make sure you're using all of the resources that you have. You don't want to have a lot of waste there. So the reclamation feature here will help you dig in and identify virtual machines that have been powered off for a long period of time, VMs that have been detected as being idle, VMs with snapshots, and orphan disks. So orphan disks are disks that are on the data store but not attached to a virtual machine. So the idea here is we can find all these resources that we can reclaim, and by doing that reclamation, we can free up capacity, which then eliminates the need to add additional hosts. So the next thing I want to show is kind of a continuation on the cost piece, but this is leveraging a new feature that's available in vRealize operations. So this allows us the ability to configure pricing. So cost is how much it costs to run the virtual machines, and price is how much I want to charge my users for the virtual machines. Slight difference between the two, but hopefully this will make sense when I run through here. So this is my pricing card that I've created. I just set this as my default, so it'll apply to everything. And I've gone in and defined my pricing card here. So I have it configured for rate. So for a VMC environment, you have to use rate. You cannot do price based on cost. So it's important to make sure you select rate. And you see here in my example, I have $5 per vCPU per month, $10 per gigabyte of memory per month, $1 per gigabyte of disk space per month. So this helps me basically identify how much I want to charge for my virtual machines, and then we can create reports based off of those to show my end users. So we have a few other options here, adding charges based on the guest operating systems. We can add charges based on tags. So we can do things like, if the virtual machine is backed up, add additional charges. If it's DR, has antivirus on it, etc. And then overall charges. So these are things like a setup charge or a recurring, like a support fee or maintenance fee. And then the last one is an assignment. Because I set this as my default, I'm not going to assign any here. This applies to all. And then once you do that, the system will start to calculate the prices of the virtual machines. So we can see here, I've got my month-to-date price of all of my virtual machines. I've got my powered off virtual machines that have been detected here, showing how much they cost. I've got the idle virtual machines, VMs with snapshots. So the idea here is now, based on all the pricing info that I entered, I can identify all these potential savings. And I can even go in here and find my application. So this is the application that was discovered with VRNI. And now I can see the price of these virtual machines. So I can see all my virtual machines that make up this application here, my month-to-date price, and then if they were powered off idle VMs or snapshots, they would be listed here. And then the last thing down here is the price of the virtual machines. So this is the details of all the virtual machines in this application.
All right, so as a networking admin, I'd like to have a little bit more visibility on what's going on security and networking wise within VMware Cloud and AWS. And we can use vRealize Network Insight for that. So to start off, I can just search for VMC SDDCs, and then I get a list of all the SDDCs that VRNI has discovered. So in this case, I've just got one, but if I've got multiple, then I can also filter based on the organization, the region, etc. I can get quick information view here where I can see the vCenter public and private IP addresses. I can see the region, those type of things. I can also see the alerts, and this alert is going to come back and bite me later, so stay tuned for that. But now I just want to have a look at the actual dashboard for this SDDC. So what's going on within this SDDC? This dashboard, I can see how many VMs are there, how many security groups, how much segments, how much firewall rules, even all the way down to which applications are hosted on this SDDC and how many direct connect interfaces are connected to it. What I also can see is what's been changing in the last 24 hours. So how many security groups, VMs, segments, firewall rules, and how many changed firewall rules have there been in the last 24 hours. So this is literally what's been going on in the last day. I can have a look at the new firewall rules, for example, if I'm interested in security, and see that this new rule is actually allowing any. So I can then go back into the VMware Cloud and AWS console and check this firewall rule out and maybe reverse it. If I scroll down, I can see the overview of the properties, the region, the vCenter, and the NSX manager IDs, but I can also see the top talkers when it comes to firewall rule IDs. Talking about security, typically you do not want to do multiple things at the same time. So when you're migrating, you're typically you're taking the firewall rules as is and then moving that over to VMC. But if you want to segment your applications, your VMs more than that, you can use the microsegmentation wheel, the donut, as I like to call it. So this donut allows you to filter and focus on networks, applications, VMs, security tags, all of that. But let's have a look at the applications. And this pretty much tells you what this application is talking to. So you have that dependency map here. If I open up this slice, I can also tell which services are being hosted in this group, which external services this application is using, the raw flows, but more interestingly, I can also have a look at the recommended file rules. So these recommended file rules are based on the actual traffic that vRealize is showing. I can even go as far as exporting these to either CSV or XML, and then we even have a tool to import them directly into VMC and AWS. One more thing that I want to show you before we move on is the networking traffic and events. So this keeps track of how many egress traffic there is, how many VMs are talking to the internet, and also pretty interesting is how many dropped flows do we have. Because we keep track of which file rules are blocking what traffic, we can actually pinpoint traffic that's being dropped by specific file rules, and then it will show up in the dropped flows. I can also use this egress traffic in order to estimate the cost of that egress traffic. Alright, so this is an overview based, but let's say that I'm troubleshooting connection between two VMs. One is on-prem and one is in VMC. Let's have a look at the VM to VM path, and it'll show you all the logical components that are in between. So in this case, we're looking at NSX, we're looking at virtual networking, and then it goes towards a physical network device. It transfers to another physical device. It goes over direct connect, comes into VMware Cloud and AWS using the tier 0 and tier 1 routers, and then it goes into the VM that we're troubleshooting. So all of these things are clickable. So if I click on the firewall, I get all the applicable firewall rules for this specific path, and this is allow any, so there's not going to be any problems here. And I can also click on all the other components. So let's have a look at the direct connect, for example. And in this case, the direct connect is having some issues. So let's have a closer look. So I can see the BGP ASN, the learned and the advertised BGP routes, but I can also see on a per BGP neighbors what the status is of that BGP peering. So that's a very quick view on operationalizing VMware Cloud and AWS using vRealize Network Insight, looking at the network and security posture. Now let's have a look at the self-service for VMware Cloud and AWS.
Hello, my name is Vincent, and I'm going to be showing what a cloud admin would do inside of vRealize Automation to work to set things up to get our MOAD application deployed into VMware Cloud on AWS. So far we've seen some operational things that we can do. Now we're going to look at how we can automate the delivery of the application and services into this hybrid cloud model. And so I'm going to show you basically how a cloud zone is set up, which is where we can carve out compute from this VMware Cloud and AWS environment, as well as multi-clouds. And then we'll look at network and storage profiles as well. So when we go into a cloud zone initially, we'll see a nice little tab here called Insights. Currently, this is beta in the vRealize Automation Cloud environment. And basically, this gives us some information around just CPU storage, a little forecasting information, which projects are associated with this cloud zone, and some of the allocations. So we can see we have a very small CPU allocation there, but it could grow over time. So this is a nice little snapshot of what's being consumed inside this cloud zone for us, and what we have available to us in this environment. And then if we go to the summary, we can just see this is a VMware Cloud and AWS account and region there. So we see even the icon for VMware Cloud and AWS is first class endpoint. Also in the compute section, we can see our resource pools and our clusters and hosts. We are basically just pointing this to the vCenter inside of VMware Cloud and AWS environment. So it looks similar to what you see in a normal vCenter, of course. We've tagged one of those as well. And we can see the projects that essentially are associated with this particular cloud zone. So we've tagged this cloud zone, and then we also have our projects and things like that associated with it. So in the network profile, this is where we can define network policies for our VMware Cloud and AWS environment. And what we can do basically is we can either consume existing networks, or we can create NSX networks as well. Here I've already have an NSX network that was pre-created inside the environment that we're going to land these VMs on. So we're just going to use this particular environment here. But again, you can choose new ones, or you can create new ones. So you can create like provider networks and things like that using the network policies tab. But here, we can either just consume what we have or just, I can add additional networks that already exist and then tag them differently. So if I wanted to have one, tagged for an SLA or some different purpose or group, I can do that. And those tags will handle a placement decision. But then we can add or just consume security groups. We can add security groups that exist in the environment here to this policy, or we can just consume the one we have. We'll just go ahead and consume the one that's already in here, since that's the only security group that I'm concerned with. Right now, we're just consuming existing security groups and just letting VMs get added to those sort of organizational purposes. And then storage profiles as well is another place where we can create storage policies. So inside of VMware Cloud and AWS, obviously there's a vSAN environment. And so we want to maybe consume storage policy-based management of the vSAN, like the different policies for vSAN, or maybe just other SPVM policies that have been created inside of vCenter. So when we click the drop-down box for the storage policy, we can see the different storage policies that exist inside the environment. And then we can consume those through the storage policy itself. And then we can see our data store clusters. So we have a workload data store cluster. There's probably a management data store cluster in there as well. And then we can check the preferred storage for the region and then tag the storage profile env VMC for our placement. Okay, and then we can also do pricing cards. So pricing cards require the vRealize Operations Manager integration. What I've done is I've created a pricing card here that will allow me to set a rate for VMware Cloud and AWS based on these charges on the right-hand side, the $2 per CPU and then $3 per gig per month, and then the $1 per gig per month. And then in the pricing section, we can set the rate and then sort of the frequency of how much we're going to, when we're going to charge it, only when powered on or always. We can also base the price and rates on tags or other custom properties that may be associated with the deployment. Or virtual machine like guest OSs and things like that. And then we've assigned this to the MOAD project. So this pricing card will only apply to things that are deployed into the MOAD project. So let's go ahead and go into the MOAD project. So I'm going to click projects, go to MOAD, and then we'll get a little overview of what's inside the project, like how many cloud templates are there, how many deployments are associated with it, and then the overall price at the bottom there as well. And then provisioning, we could just see which cloud zones this particular project has access to. So vCloud Foundation on-prem, VMware Cloud on AWS in our hybrid cloud model, and then the overall price of the deployments, and then the individual price of the deployments that are associated with this project. So again, this part does require the vRealize Operations Manager integration, but we can see the deployment prices. Okay, so let's go into the cloud template for our application. We can see we have a front-end server, which is our web server, MySQL, and a load gen. But notice on the right-hand side, under the cloud template YAML, we're only going to vCloud Foundation right now. So I don't have this particular cloud template set up to go to VMware Cloud and AWS. So I'm going to click this Environment tab. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just scroll down a little bit and add VMC to my enum list. So let me just do that real quick. I'll hit VMC. And then I'm going to make this the default value. Because when we deploy this, I want it to just default to VMC now. But still have VCF as an option. So it'll be kind of this hybrid cloud agnostic approach. So now we can see VCF and VMC are both available, and then they'll use the tags that the env VMC and env VCF that are associated with the different cloud zones and network profiles and storage profiles and other things that I may have tagged that I want to be able to consume from these two environments. Now we've kind of got this kind of ready to deploy into multiple clouds. So I'm going to version it. When I version it, I'm going to check this release this version to catalog, because one thing I want to ultimately do is send this to our service broker catalog so we can have a self-service hybrid cloud model for our organization so people can go in and request this application from a role-based access, policy-driven catalog. The next thing I'll need to do in order to make this available is go ahead and go into a service broker, and then we'll go ahead and configure this. So let me just go down to service broker. And then what you'll see is all our items here inside of the service broker, but I want to go ahead and make sure that that latest version of the item is here. So I'm going to go into content policies, go down, I'm going to go to MOAD right here, because this is where our blueprints, our cloud templates are associated with this particular content source. And then essentially now it should just show up in the catalog, that version 6. So I'm going to filter here because there's a lot of stuff. So I'm going to filter into MOAD for the project, so we can say, okay, now my MOAD projects, here's my MOAD shopping cart catalog item, and then I'll be able to request this. So let me go ahead and hit request. We can see version 6 up at the top. I'll need to give this some information before I can go ahead and deploy it. So obviously the first thing I'll need to do is give it a deployment name. So I'll just type MOAD shopping cart. And then I could give a username and password and then select the environment I want to go into. So I'll just continue to choose VMC. Now remember that was the default as well that I chose. So I'm going to just do one front-end web server in this particular case. And then also what I can do is I can calculate the cost. So this is an estimated upfront cost of what this could cost if once deployed on a daily basis. So it's going to fetch the estimated price. So you see the $2.32 daily price estimate. If I click details here, it will go ahead and give me a little bit of a breakdown. The cost will be as well, like the compute, storage, things like that. So we can see each individual virtual machine that's going to get deployed and then see what the cost would be on that daily basis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and submit this now. Submit this and we'll kick this deployment off. What I'm going to do though here, because this is going to take just a few minutes to deploy, for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is I'll just show you an existing deployment that I have so we can take a look at what happens once this is deployed and been kind of sitting out there for a little bit of time. So let me click on my existing VMC environment or deployment. So you can see I got 3 systems here, front end, load gen, MySQL got deployed. We can see the 4 tabs, topology, history, price, and monitor right there in the middle portion of the screen. One thing we could do is we could take day 2 actions on these machines, can interact with the deployment from here. So for instance, I could click on the MySQL VM. Maybe I forgot to add a tag or something, so I can go in. We could see custom day 2 actions, but I'll just click update tags and then add a tag to this machine. So perhaps I forgot to do this, or maybe later on I figured out I want to add a tag. Now when I add a tag, it'll show up here inside of vRealize Automation. It will also show up in the cloud or wherever this machine is deployed, AWS, vSphere, wherever it is. And then this will just kind of be another action that we'll see in the history as well around what happened with this particular machine. So basically now we can also take a look at some other things, like if I want to look at history, I can see that the update tags was just done, and then I can see the create down there, which was when the deployment got created. So I can look at price from here as well. So again, this does require the vRealize Operations Manager integration. But I look at daily, weekly, monthly costs. So if I click on daily, I can just see the daily overall cost of the deployment. We can look at sort of the overall price and then also details. So I can go in and look at details of the individual virtual machines from here and see up to now what has been the price of that particular virtual machine. Also on the monitor tab, we get some inclusion metrics from Operations Manager for CPU, memory, disk, and network. So if we are having just some spike in workload, we can identify it here and then go into Operations Manager and drill down a little bit more to what might be happening. Okay, so let me close this out and go into the deployment that we just did so you can see what it looks like right afterward. We can see that the create was successful. The health so far is good. So everything's looking pretty good so far, even though we just deployed it a couple minutes ago. What I'll do is I'll click the front end server because that's my web server, and I just want to take that IP address and basically plug that into a web browser and see if the MOAD shopping cart application was successfully deployed or not. And there it is at the 1072.82.237 address. So it looks like our MOAD shopping cart application was successfully installed just by tweaking that blueprint, sending it over to VMware Cloud on AWS, and now we have it in our hybrid cloud.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this demo today. As you can see, we've planned and migrated to VMware Cloud on AWS. We've shown how we can manage our applications in VMware Cloud on AWS. And now we can provide self-service hybrid cloud to our internal customers.